Okay, they didn't have the leash that I was looking for. However, it did give me some ideas on how to make one myself. They had one of those, pull ropes, and you just need some connectors. That's all you would need, is some connectors. I thought about looking somewhere else, but I don't really want to look nowhere else. So, here's one of the things also that I was thinking about, right? Because there are people that live in foreign countries, right? And their seniors are doing well, right? Here in America, we mistreat seniors. This is supposed to be the land of the free and the youth. They didn't say youthful, but, they want to say it, right? Which is why so many of the elders feel like, they're being pushed out, right? It was like, they built this place, they've worked so long, and yes, now they achieved, we would think, okay, if you save enough money to where you think you should be able to live off of, let's just say 85% of your income, right? But then, right, when retirement happens, everything is inflated to where now, the miscalculation is, nope, you should have saved more, right? And honestly, I don't necessarily believe that would have even saved you because of how they were taking people's money, right? They were taking people's money through your investments, through your 401ks, through your stock, they were taking money that way, right? So there was nothing that you could do, right? They made sure, to put in place certain measures to where you couldn't withdraw your money before they had a chance to take it from you, right? Otherwise, you'll end up, looking at charges like Martha Stewart, right? Because they'll swear up and down you had insider information, right? How do you have insider information, to take your stock out of a certain market, right? And then be penalized because you're like, no, this is a bad investment. Okay, then they sue you and maybe even put your ass in jail. Okay, because you seen it, you foresaw, you had the foresight to see that, too many complaints on this business, I'm gonna pull my money out. And they're like, you ain't pulling your money out. You can only pull your money out twice a year. Right? That's if you don't have any loans out or you hadn't made any other withdrawals prior, in the year. And that's what they did to us. Right? So at some point, you're just sitting there, watching. I was just sitting there watching my money drain. Right? It went from $350,000 that I thought I had saved up for me, to retire early, not realizing that, damn, I should have bounced, right? But I kept holding on, thinking that, well, I could get the bigger ring, right? I can get the pension. Well, I am still eligible for the pension. The pension is going to be available, come my 61st birthday. But it really wasn't worth it. It wasn't worth it. But there was nothing I could do about it. Right? I couldn't force them to stick to their contract, and if they're not willing to stick to their contract, do you even know what that means? That means I'm not sticking to the contract, therefore I'm breaking the law. And there's no what did I say before? Right, you don't make deals with terrorists. If you're dealing with somebody that's willing to break the law, you're dealing with a terrorist. And that's what we had on our hands, right? So I kept watching it, and then somehow, miraculously, it leveled out at about 18,000. I was like, 18,000, is that all? Okay? And it leveled there. It stayed there. I was like, oh, okay. But whatever else the losses were that was happening with Fidelity, because let's keep it real, Fidelity is the one that has been making all of these investments behind the scenes. Fidelity is the one that is also financing the Bitcoin movement. I said it. And, they've also created some losses. And we all heard them even say out of their own mouths in their corporate, in their corporate discussions, Amazon is going to have to lose money, for a couple of years, but after a couple of years, they should be able to start making money, if they keep undercutting, the market. Right? And I guess they thought they were doing the same thing that, these box stores like Walmart was doing, right? Walmart, they moved in. The only difference about Walmart, though, Walmart was offering cheaper stuff for cheaper price, right? Walmart starts to lose when Walmart starts to charge high price, like quality price, and still offer cheaper foods, which is what people are doing nowadays. People are like, they figure that they're, that nobody can get around, from having to buy from them. So they're going to charge as much as the next person is charging that has a better quality material, right? an example. You know, when you went to the mall, right? You went to the mall and you seen all of these really nice stuff, right? At, let's just say, at Nordstrom's, right? You would go to Nordstrom's and you're like, oh, this is nice. Oh, this is nice. Oh, this is a nice quality material. Oh, this is, built really well, right? But it was as if you had the option to then go to JCPenney's, right? And JCPenney's, they had your moderate type of, clothing, right? They wasn't expensive and they wasn't the cheap, right? Because if you wanted the cheap, you didn't go to the malls at all. You'd either go to the swap meet or you would go to places like Rainbow, Cato's, right? You would go to one of those places. Now, honestly, when they started coming out with, Temu and Shein, a lot of people went to the really cheaper stuff, right? All they had to do was wait 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and they got their stuff. Yes, it looked like it was open. It looked like, they had to repackage it and all of that stuff. Yes. However, you didn't have to, you spent 1/4 of what you would have spent on something that was, created here in America. Right? And at one time I was thinking, yeah, that's great, until I started seeing that, I seen a video about that location, like where Shein, right? Where they would, have all of these, manufacturing, sewing companies, right? And how they was living and how they was getting paid, and, and it was just awful. It was awful because the government wasn't giving them their money, right? The government gave them was exploiting them. These people was working night and day. Trying to produce these products and get them shipped. And then to see, not only was they working really hard, but how they was living. They was not living well at all. They was the hardest working people on the planet. And back then, they didn't have the internet like they do now, right? Where you can get paid, and just talk on the internet. They didn't have that, right? And a lot of people didn't know, that anybody could get on the internet. We kind of felt like, oh, you have to be special, this, that, and the third. Well, a lot of people aren't special. They're just in need, and they're getting paid. Now, some people, they can get on the internet, and for whatever reason, they're not getting paid. Some people, they could be putting out job, resumes and applications, and they're not getting hired. And I feel like that's because there was a judgment that happened, and there were people that, like Job in the Bible, right, had the integrity to stand up to the corruption and the maltreatment that's going on upon the earth, to still be those few people that justified, keeping the human beings in existence. In other words, not wiping us out, right? Could have been an apocalypse, yes. However, all they needed was however many people, even if it was just one, maybe it was just one, decent person on the planet, right, to justify, not wiping out or, causing us to be extinct. It happened like that. Okay?